To Tech Talks, a podcast by the Technology Education Collaborative. TEC is an Arizona 501c3 nonprofit that empowers everyday people with useful information about the technology they use each and every day. Today, we're sitting down with John Dellmar, a digital forensics specialist, and he's going to answer our standard 5 questions about what he does every day. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
All right. So, like I said, the way this works, everyone gets the same 5 questions. You ready?
Shoot.
What is your title and position?
I am a digital forensics specialist with EPS Digital Forensics, and I work for EPS Digital Forensics. However, all the statements in this interview are my personal opinions and not the opinion or position of EPS Digital Forensics or any of the operations thereof. We provide criminal and civil digital forensics and litigation support in Arizona and many other states.
And so what does that mean? So what specifically do you do on a daily basis?
We examine evidence or collect evidence and examine evidence collected from all sorts of digital devices, whether it's phone, computers, your car, wearables, the cloud, and take that information and try and quantify what is there and speak to its truth in support of criminal and civil litigation.
So can you give me a completely not real but generic example?
Currently, we are doing a brute force unlock on a phone that was collected post-mortem from a teenager to look through there and see if there is signs of bullying and also to help bring closure to the family. We also have a criminal case in which we are looking at cell phone tower data and Google location data and speaking to the truth of the police reports used to garner the indictment and that are going to be presented in a court of law and make sure that that information is presented in a factual and scientifically sound manner.
So you've mentioned a lot of different technologies. You've mentioned vehicles, you've mentioned, cell phones, you've mentioned computers. Is it kind of any technological device that may have evidence, or is there things you don't work on? Or
in broad strokes, we work with a lot of the various technologies. There are specializations. So if, for instance, we get a sound file, we go through, we collect data and we get a sound file. And if the client needs somebody to speak to whether or not that is an original sound file or if it's been modified or any other information, we will engage a third-party specialist for that. But we serve as general technology. So we cover a lot of stuff. And in the digital age we're in right now, everything is interconnected, You can't walk down the street and not generate 1,000 bright and shining points of data. So in that kind of environment, there's a lot of stuff for us to look at. And that's part of the job is, knowing what we should look at and, what is just going to be digital noise.
So what is your favorite thing about your job?
I enjoy the truth. That's going to sound really weird, but I derive a joy from the purity of getting past he said, she said, to just the basis of this is factual. I can speak to this. There's no presumption. There's no assumption. This is what it is, and it can be nothing else. And, getting to that point is, where I can answer a question with certainty and without reservation is one of the joys of the job.
And what is your least favorite thing about your job? Because we all got something we don't like to do at work.
I dislike, with a fair amount of passion, the process of paperwork. And I realize there's a certain level of, it's all about that because you've got to document everything you do. But the doing is the fun part. The filling out all the paperwork is the thing I would like to leave in the rearview mirror.
So what kind of paperwork? Are you writing reports? Is this like administrative paperwork?
One of the challenges we have is due to the nature, because like I said, litigation support, which means we deal with the courts. And anybody who's dealt with the courts, it is one of two things. It either happens too fast or it happens too slow. And for instance, I just recently had to unseal some evidence on a case that we've been working on since 2018, and it's still in court. And, there's not been, it's not like it's up for appeal. We haven't done the first round, and that's 6 years. So you have to document stuff because rarely can you count on something having an expeditious end. I mean, when something wraps up and like, oh, it's done and we're finished and we never need to touch this again, that's such a rarity. At a minimum, the civil stuff can hang around for 7 years. It's just a matter of course. So we have to document. You have to cross your T's, dot your I's, and document everything, because even though I'll never forget this 5 years down the road, what were we thinking about when we did this 5 years ago? You don't have that in your headspace anymore. So if you haven't written it down someplace, you get to redo the work, and that's never fun.
So what would the one practical thing that you would tell someone who's interested in getting into this particular facet of tech? What is a practical thing they could do or should do?
Because of the nature of the business, and because the tools and the training can be punitively expensive, I would recommend that anybody who's looking to get into this, somebody who this job speaks passion to, is you are really going to want to get in with law enforcement, whether it be at a federal level, a city level, a state level. The digital forensics, the tools, the techniques, the tools you use, and the reasons why you have to use those have become so commonplace. I mean, they're using vehicle data in accident investigations now. There's been a recent spat of, this was kind of one of those interesting things, where police in California are now seizing Teslas that are parked on the street if there's a violent crime in the area, because the Teslas have cameras in them. And the police, and this hasn't been officially declared, but I'm assuming that it's much, much easier to, get somebody to give a copy of the vehicle's camera data when you're threatening to throw their $60,000 car into impound than it is to issue a subpoena for that information from Tesla and fight through their legal department. So there's a different level of motivation there in between the two parties to comply. So with even a traffic accident, having a digital forensic side of it, law enforcement is on the leading edge of the daily use of it. So if you don't have a strong technology background and you're just looking to get started into this, the suggestion is get into the law enforcement side of it. We see a lot of our compatriots, a lot of people in this industry have got a law enforcement, either at a federal, state, city level background. And that seems to be a very common thing. So, keep your nose clean. And a lot of it isn't sworn positions anymore. For a long time, you saw a lot of people that were sworn police officers. So they had gone through the police academy and stuff like that. And I think that law enforcement is waking up to the fact that there's a different set of skills that benefits digital forensics than, beat cop or detective or investigator. There's some overlap there, but, they're hunting for kind of a little bit of a different breed of cat when they're hunting for somebody who's a digital examiner, so they're much more amicable. We're starting to see more civilian people that are working in support positions with the Cs. And since I haven't heard of a bunch of programs that teach this, because it's all, there's one company doing computer forensics, there's one doing Macintosh forensics, there's another one doing cell phone forensics, there's another one that does CDRs, which is your cell data dumps for locationality. There's a bunch of small players in the market out there. I say small, but there's a bunch of disparate players in the market. So there's not one place where you go to get all of it. It's fragmented. And so having a government agency foot the bill for that fragmented training is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it'll give you an ample opportunity to actually practice your trade, because there's always somebody committing a crime, and everybody's got a phone in their pocket. So we're all walking around with computers. They're all connected. They're all collecting data. And that's where that need to be able to parse that data out for law enforcement is critical for them.
All right. So our final question, kind of a personal question. Do you have any passion projects, any organizations you support, any other interests, anything you're working on that you'd want to share with people? It does not have to be related to your occupation.
I do a lot of the additive manufacturing. So 3D printing, laser cutting, small scale CNC, that maker space where you sit back here and you try and create something. That's always been, the ability to create is divine, so being able to have that creative and, you're always having to keep up to date. So it's something that exercises your mind. So yeah, that maker space is fun. I keep probably more reptiles than I should.
I was going to call you out on the herpetology if you didn't mention it, because I know you've done some good work in that space too.
I once a year I get together and I do a presentation for a bunch of 7th and 8th graders, and then I usually get shanghaied for a bunch of kindergartners or first graders to do the same presentation for them after school. But at one of the local schools, I do that. And then, I have participated with nonprofit organizations for that, to push the responsible pet ownership. You see a lot of overly dramatic or sensationally idiotic things out there in YouTube space that are done for the purposes of gathering attention, because that's how you get views these days. And I think that some of those choices that those people make are self-serving and are very detrimental to both the animals and the hobby. And, they're cool critters, and they can be very interactive and very intelligent and, can bring people joy and peace and contentment. And as long as they're kept responsibly, they're safer than goldfish. I have got, let's call it 8 boa constrictors right now. The biggest is about 7.5, 8 foot long. And then I have got a, let's call it precocious Argus monitor that we're working on bringing civility to, but it's not the friendliest little thing in the world, but an amazing animal. And if you've ever sat back and watched the velociraptors in Jurassic Park and they look into the eye and you can see the cunning going on, you see the, as Blue sits back here and figures out exactly how she's going to cover that 15 feet. I see that every time I walk past that lizard. There's something going on in there. There isn't subtitles for what it is, but there's something going on in there, and it's more than, it's doing some complex thought.
Is that all of them?
That's all of them for me right now. My daughter's got a hognose. I don't know if teenagers count as pets, but it depends on who you're talking to. That
are they feral?
It depends. You catch them right before dinner, and you can see them kind of reverting back to their base forms, and you kind of like throw a Cheeto at them or something like that, and hopefully they don't take a hand off.
All right. So thank you so much for coming, John.
A pleasure to be here.
This podcast was recorded at the Advanced Cyber Systems Lab at Gateway Community College at the Washington campus. The ACSL is a tech hub for the general public where you can use a 3D printer, record a podcast, practice advanced tech skills on one of our servers, and do a whole lot more, all free of charge.